And there it is. Probably the most controversial car of recent time. I'm not speculating on anything until this next version is in my hands. So while we're waiting, I decided to make my own version too. The biggest problems were that it doesn't sit up high enough. It also needs to be stretched out a little bit more. Some Proline Badlands to solve our tire issues. These blow out too easily on a 4S battery, which this car is supposed to take. Ooh, sticker. This transmitter actually started getting stuck on me, but I am going to use it one more time just so we can see how a better one compares. And the steering trim is way off, so hopefully we can adjust the servo arm. The center differential is way too loose and allows for a whole lot of ballooning of the front tires and not enough wheelies on 3S. And the steering servo saver was way too loose, which we took care of in the initial review. Oh, and we are also going to try a bigger motor pinion. We're going to start with thickening up the center diff fluid. We're going to put 500,000 weight in it. The grease is a little bit dirty here, like this isn't a perfect seal. That's a heavy assembly. Chunky spur gear right there. Is that like 0.8 mod maybe? Uh-oh. Oh no. Not a fun situation. I do see a hint of red, so they might have used red Loctite surgery to do here then. I used a T10 Torx bit and beat it in there. Oh yeah, that's in there. These need to be Loctited, but probably not with red. After a whole lot of headache, a whole lot of soldering iron heat, we got all 4 screws out. 2 of them were absolutely terrible to get out. All right, we have a sealed differential. There's an O-ring here. There's a gasket there, and there are O-rings underneath those shims, about halfway filled with oil. The front and rear diffs have grease in them, not oil like this one. They are sealed also. Luckily, I do have replacement screws. All right, now we're gonna move on to stretching out the rear end. Almost every single screw on this truck is a 2mm hex head. Looks like we're gonna have to trim a little bit off of these new arms. These arms are actually for a 3S Typhon, by the way. They're RPMs. These are Arma Granite knuckles and hubs. That was a big one. These axles are from a Red Cat MT10E. They're slightly longer and they fit the granite hubs perfectly. They're still a little too short. Well, I can't say I didn't put forth the effort. Tried all those, tried to find a way to make granite axles work. I even tried Frankensteining the stock axles and granite axles together, and it's just not gonna work. Plan B. Wham! Yes! Look at that. That's sitting all kinds of up there. Now it's a monster truck. That's a lot better. Oh, and I adjusted the wheelie bar so that it's down a little bit lower so that the truck, again, doesn't go back too far. I have Arma Granite shocks on it. It might still handle like total poo because we weren't able to make it longer. I mean, I tried so hard to make it longer, but it just needs to be manufactured that way. Since these shocks are so much longer, I was also able to spread them out to the far right hole, and I just didn't reinstall these rock guards. Literally, the only new parts on here are the shocks. Swapped over the bottom metal eyelets from the stock shocks to the granite shocks. Hopefully it doesn't tip over too easily, but it probably will. And unfortunately you can't use hex extensions because the hexes that this uses along with axles are not standard. It uses a double flat design instead of a pin. There might be some out there that work, but I don't know. So right now we're gonna see how it runs with the stock pinion gear, and then we're gonna try it with a 15 tooth, which is the biggest one the stock motor mount will allow for. Oh, and the more you tighten these 4 screws, the harder it is to slide this switch. It lands a billion times better than it did. Oh, body popped off. Oh God. Right over the rocks. Ooh, this truck does not like front flips. Loves double B's though. Something popped off. I I guess a screw just backed out. The metal nut is still in there. Yep, still tightened. So I would maybe put a little bit of Loctite on those screws. Well, it's time to put a bigger motor pinion in here. We'll just go straight to 15. If it can handle it, great. Oh, it's got a 12 in it, so we're jumping from a 12 to a 15. More screws to be extra careful with. They are in there. 2mm grub screw. We also have an E-clip to remove. Sometimes it's better to just use the right tool. And while I'm finishing this up, I hired some bozo to chop up the wood in the backyard so we can finally get rid of it. I cannot stand this controller. It's really just not good for this car at all. So I replaced the receiver and bound it up to this Dumbo RC. Plus, I was able to remove the servo arm, straighten it out, and reinstall it. So hopefully, those two things combined greatly improved the steering. Floats over that suspension tester. It actually lands like a normal car now. Oh, body rub. Much better and more even steering angle, both directions now. Oh! That was ugly. You tell me the dude that did this just up and left this mess?
Unreal.
Whoa! Oh! Ow! No, she's good. It's not as tip heavy as I thought it would be. It's pretty good. Oh! Body. Why do the front flips keep going to the left? Oh, that was a bad hit. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. What? It's trash day. That's weird. The wheel nuts do keep loosening up. It might just be with these wheels. I would keep checking those and use Loctite also. I did not use Loctite. Squirrels. This is still only on punch level 7. So it is a bit tippier on the concrete than in the grass. And it won't self-right out here. Almost. Oh, God! Why'd you do that?
I didn't use it.
Oh. Oh, no. No! All right. It took just about a full speed crash into a trash can to finally break this thing. And the brake is rather mild, but I want to show you a few other things first. It's a little bit cooler out today, around 82 degrees. The motor is hot. That was a 4S pack, and a lot of it was in the grass. I don't have a temperature gun, so it's hard to say if it gets hotter than a normal car of this size running in the grass would get, but definitely too hot to hold your thumb on for too long. And that bigger pinion will definitely cause the motor and ESC to get hotter. So if you up that pinion size, be careful. Otherwise, it seems to handle it pretty well. One thing that I notice, especially on the concrete, is how far these tires lean on higher speed turns. You can see it there. Now, some of that is just on the suspension flex. The camber changes a whole lot on these rear tires, but also it's the fact that these parts, like the shock tower and the knuckles, have a lot of flexibility to them. But the other thing that I see that they could improve on is this knuckle could be up a whole lot higher, just like it is on the arm of granite. This knuckle joint sits way up high, and this one sits way down here, not too high above the axle, so it's much easier for the wheel and knuckle to push against that link. The fronts don't seem to do it quite as badly, and that is probably part of the reason why when it wheelies, it gets a little bit squirrely. You can see it doing all its flex and stuff, but I also believe that's exacerbated by the fact that we don't actually have diff oil in the differentials, well, the front and the rear. That's just grease. So they diff out way too easily, causing the traction to go back and forth between left and right wheels. I also believe that adding thicker diff fluid in the front and rear would help with the front flips, because the front flips get a little bit twisty. And at higher speeds, especially in the grass, I still felt where the steering was lacking.
I don't know if it's the servo itself or still that we could maybe make the servo saver even tighter. Durability seems to be pretty on point so far. We had some bad crashes directly into the corners. We had some bad crashes directly on the wheelie bar. There's no bends or cracks around the stress areas of the control arms or the hinge pins. The wheelie bar plastic is fine. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. There is no problem. Suspension still works smoothly. What broke from hitting that trash can was the screw that holds the knuckle to the hub pulled out of the knuckle itself. More than likely that screw hole is damaged beyond use, but that was certainly my fault. We did get a few extra cracks in the body this time, especially in the rear. Some damage right there, probably from tires. Little crack right there. And of course, even after tightening these screws, the body did pop off a few times. No more ground pounding, just standard chassis slaps. So yes, this is almost how MJX should have made this car, and hopefully will soon. With the exception, I still want to see longer arms, and these shocks could probably use a little bit of thicker oil in them to make it even better. Now, speaking of how MJX should have made things, this has been a rocky release, to say the least. That almost rhymes. Just this morning, I got an email from MakerFire saying that there is an updated version practically on the way. And then, possibly an even newer version in just a few months. Hopefully with all these things we've talked about, if that's true. And I am well aware that this goes against what other people have heard from what should be other reliable sources. So again, I'm not gonna say anything for sure until it's in my hands. And once it is, you're gonna see it. Now I have one of these cars brand new in the stock form on my raffle page. And if this updated version is real, that's the one the winner will get. And if it doesn't have longer shocks on it, I'll include a set of granite shocks in there for you. That way, if you want to, you can raise it up like this yourself. And if you prefer a rival MT10, I've got one of those in there too for the same price tickets.